Moral hazard. Moral hazard is the final form of information asymmetry we're going to look at, where the buyer knows more than the seller. In moral hazard, once again, some buyers are more costly to supply than others. But now, instead of it being due to the type of person they are, it's due to the way they behave, the actions they choose to take. Buyers know how they're likely to behave after purchasing the product, while the seller doesn't. And perhaps most importantly, sometimes purchasing the product makes a buyer more likely to engage in the behavior that makes it expensive to supply them. Here's an example. Accident insurance. If you have accident insurance, you may be more likely to engage in risky behaviors where you could get hurt, like bungee jumping. You figure, I can do this more safely now because I'm covered by insurance if anything goes wrong. If I get hurt, the insurance company will cover it. Another example of moral hazard happens when in financial crises. You may have been hearing a lot in the news recently about banks going out of business. And sometimes the government steps in and pays off some of the assets in the bank, and in order to get other banks to take them over. A bank bailout it can often lead to a moral hazard problem. When big financial institutions make very risky investments, they can, for example, invest in low quality real estate loans. And when those loans go bad, these institutions can be in danger of going bankrupt and pulling down the financial system and the rest of the economy. So the government steps in with assistance to keep the banks in business and the financial sector and the economy going. One expression for these kinds of institutions is that they're too big to fail. Now, these banks made risky investments that went bad, and the government stepped in and kept them from going out of business. So will these banks be more or less inclined to take on risky investments in the future? They'll probably be more inclined because they know if they get into really big trouble, the government will bail them out. That's another example of moral hazard. Knowing that the government will bail you out makes you more inclined to engage in risky behavior. So how should we deal with moral hazard? Sometimes insurance companies, particularly auto insurance companies, may reward people for good behavior. An auto insurance company might give a good driver discount. And who will go? Who's going to go to the company with an accident? On the other hand, some companies advertise accident forgiveness policies. What kind of person do you think is more likely to want insurance with accident forgiveness? Maybe someone who engages in moral hazard or even adverse selection. Another way that institutions deal with moral hazard is by limiting the extent to which the party imposing the cost can engage in the risky behavior. For example, the first government bank bailout was instituted after the Great Depression, but that was when we first instituted deposit insurance that would be available to depositors if their bank went bankrupt. But at the same time that deposit insurance was instituted, the government also created a regulatory system where the banks would be supervised and made sure they were financially sound. So on the one hand, a bailout, at least of depositors, would be available. But on the other hand, there was some regulation and supervision making sure that the banks didn't engage in risky behavior because they thought they could because of moral hazard. But still, moral hazard can be a real problem in industry where firms and individuals are tempted to take risks.